She was just a struggling waitress trying to survive her last shift on Christmas Eve, risking her job to sneak a bowl of hot soup to a shivering homeless old woman freezing outside the restaurant window. When her cruel manager caught her and threw her out into the blizzard, humiliating her in front of the wealthy patrons, Emma thought her life was over. But what she didn't know was that the beggar she just saved wasn't a beggar at all. She was the lost mother of the billionaire owner of the very restaurant that just fired her. None of them could have imagined that this single act of kindness would trigger a chain of events that would bring an entire empire to its knees. Before we go back to that fateful night, let us know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow I have a part 2 that will absolutely break your heart. The wind didn't just blow that night, it screamed. It was a merciless, biting gale that swept through the streets of downtown Chicago, carrying with it a curtain of heavy, wet snow that buried the sidewalks in white. The temperature had plummeted to 10 degrees below zero, the kind of cold that gnawed at your bones and turned your breath into instant clouds of ice. But inside the Gilded Spoon, the city's most exclusive restaurant, the blizzard was nothing more than a scenic backdrop. Inside, the air smelled of roasted chestnuts, expensive truffle oil, and old money. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over patrons wearing suits that cost more than a car and dresses that shimmered like liquid diamonds. Laughter clinked against champagne flutes, drowning out the howling wind outside. Emma, however, didn't feel the warmth. At 24, Emma looked older. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight, practical bun, but wisps of it escaped, framing a face pale from exhaustion. Her feet throbbed in cheap, worn-out black flats that offered zero arch support, a dull ache that had started 3 hours ago and was now a sharp, stabbing pain with every step. She balanced a heavy silver tray loaded with filet mignon and lobster thermidor, navigating the crowded dining room with the practiced grace of someone who couldn't afford to make a mistake. "More wine, sir?" she asked, her voice steady, forcing a smile that didn't reach her tired blue eyes. The man didn't even look at her. He just tapped his glass with a manicured fingernail. "Obviously, and be quick about it. We have places to be." "Of course, sir." Emma retreated to the service station, her hands trembling slightly as she set the tray down. She checked the clock on the wall. 10:45 p.m. Another hour. Just another hour and she could go home, call her little brother, and tell him that she made enough tips to keep the heat on for January. Maybe, if she was lucky. She leaned against the counter for a microsecond of rest, her gaze drifting toward the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows at the front of the restaurant. That's when she saw her. On the other side of the glass, separated by only 2 inches of transparency but a universe of circumstance, stood a figure. It was an old woman. She was wrapped in layers of mismatched rags, a tattered gray coat that was 3 sizes too big, and a woolen scarf that looked like it had been unraveled and knitted back together a dozen times. The woman wasn't begging. She wasn't holding a sign. She was just standing there, pressed against the brickwork of the building's exterior, trying to steal a fraction of the heat radiating from the restaurant's vents. Snow was piling up on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. Her skin was a terrifying shade of gray, and even from this distance, Emma could see the violent tremors racking her frail body. The woman looked up, and for a split second, her eyes locked with Emma's. They weren't angry eyes. They were hollow, resigned, the eyes of someone who had accepted that this cold night might be their last. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked around the dining room. Dozens of people were eating, laughing, wasting food. Half-eaten steaks were being cleared away. Bread baskets untouched were being dumped into the trash. And yet, right there, a human being was freezing to death. "Emma!" The sharp bark of her name made her jump. She spun around to face Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins was a man who wore his authority like a weapon. Tall, with slicked back hair and a suit that fit too tightly around his midsection, he managed the restaurant with military precision and zero empathy. He despised anything that disrupted the aesthetic of the Gilded Spoon. "What are you doing staring out the window?" Collins hissed, his voice low but dripping with venom. "Table 4 needs water. Table 7 is waiting for their check. Do I pay you to daydream?" "No, sir," Emma stammered, lowering her head. There's an old woman outside, Mr. Collins. She looks like she's freezing. I think she's in trouble." Collins glanced at the window with a look of pure disgust, as if Emma had pointed out a rat. It's downtown, Emma. There are always vagrants, he sneered, checking his gold watch. If she wanted help, she should have gone to a shelter. She's bad for business. If the customers see her, they get uncomfortable. Ignore her. If she's still there in 10 minutes, I'll call the police to have her removed. The police? Emma's eyes widened. Sir, it's Christmas Eve. She's just standing there. She's not hurting anyone. She is hurting the brand, Collins snapped, stepping into her personal space. Now get back to work. If I catch you slacking off again, don't bother coming back for your shift tomorrow. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Emma whispered. She grabbed a water pitcher and moved back onto the floor, but her mind was screaming. Every time she poured water into a crystal glass, she thought of the thirst. Every time she smelled the hot, savory gravy, her stomach twisted in guilt. She cleared a table near the window. A plate of roasted chicken, barely touched, maybe 2 bites taken, sat there. It was still steaming. Normally, policy was strict. All leftovers went immediately into the trash. Taking food was considered theft, immediate termination. Emma looked at the chicken, then she looked through the glass. The old woman had slid down the wall and was now sitting on the frozen pavement, hugging her knees to her chest. Her head was bowed low. She had stopped shivering. That's a bad sign, Emma thought, panic rising in her throat. When they stop shivering, that's when the hypothermia sets in. Emma looked toward the manager's office. The door was slightly ajar, but Collins was on the phone, his back turned. Her hands moved before her brain could stop them. Instead of scraping the chicken into the bin, Emma grabbed a clean takeout box from under the counter. With lightning speed, she slid the warm chicken breast, a scoop of mashed potatoes, and a large bread roll into the box. She grabbed a plastic spoon and a napkin. She hid the box under her apron, the heat burning against her stomach, a dangerous, forbidden warmth. She scanned the room. The coast was clear. I'm taking the trash out back, Emma called out to the busboy, her voice trembling slightly. He nodded, too tired to care. Emma moved toward the side exit that led to the alleyway. She knew the risks. She needed this job. Her brother needed this money. If Collins caught her, she was done. But the image of those hollow, resigned eyes haunted her. Kindness wasn't a transaction for Emma. It was a reflex she couldn't suppress. She pushed open the heavy steel door. The wind hit her like a physical blow, almost knocking the breath out of her lungs. It was deafeningly loud out here. She shivered violently in her thin uniform, clutching the warm box tight against her chest as she trudged through the snow around the corner of the building to the front. Ma'am, Emma called out, her voice snatched away by the wind. The pile of rags didn't move. Emma knelt down in the snow, the icy wetness immediately soaking through her tights. She reached out a shaking hand and touched the woman's shoulder. It felt frail, like bird bones wrapped in wool. Ma'am, she said louder, I brought you something hot. Slowly, painfully, the old woman lifted her head. Her face was blue with cold, her eyelashes frosted with ice. She looked at Emma with confusion, as if she were seeing an angel or a hallucination. Here, Emma said, opening the box. Steam rose up into the frigid air, smelling of rosemary and butter. It's chicken and potatoes. Please, you have to eat. The old woman's eyes widened. She stared at the food, then at Emma, then back at the food. Her cracked lips parted, trying to form words, but her jaw was too frozen to speak. It's okay, Emma whispered, tears of sympathy welling in her eyes, hot against the freezing wind. I'm not going to hurt you. Eat, please. With a trembling hand, the woman reached for the spoon. She couldn't grip it properly. Her fingers were too stiff. Emma gently took the spoon back, scooped up some potatoes, and held it to the woman's lips. I've got you, Emma said softly. I've got you. For a moment, the storm seemed to quiet down. In the midst of the freezing hell of a Chicago winter, a small circle of warmth was created by two strangers on a sidewalk. But neither of them saw the shadow looming behind the glass door of the restaurant entrance. Neither of them saw Mr. Collins standing there, watching, his face twisting into a mask of rage. The door burst open. What do you think you are doing? Mr. Collins didn't just step out. He stomped into the snow, his expensive Italian leather shoes crunching violently against the ice. The wind howled, but his voice cut through it like a serrated knife. I asked you a question, Emma, he screamed, his face turning purple with a mix of cold and rage. Is this my food? Emma flinched, instinctively shielding the old woman with her body. Mr. Collins, please. She was starving. It was just the leftovers from table 4. It was going in the trash anyway. "It is company property," Collins roared. He looked down at the old woman, Margaret, who was shrinking back against the brick wall, trembling not just from the cold now, but from fear. The box of warm chicken and potatoes sat open in her lap, the steam rising like a fragile prayer. Without a shred of hesitation, Collins kicked the box. It was a brutal, heartless motion. His shoe connected with the cardboard, sending the chicken, the potatoes, and the bread flying into the dirty, slushy snow. The food, the only source of warmth Margaret had felt in hours, was ruined in an instant. Margaret let out a small, strangled gasp, her hands reaching out futilely towards the spilled meal. "No!" Emma cried out, horror washing over her face. She dropped to her knees, ignoring the wet snow soaking her uniform. "Why would you do that? She's a human being." "She is a parasite," Collins spat. He pointed a shaking finger at Emma. "And you are a thief. I run a 5-star establishment, not a soup kitchen for gutter rats. You're fired, Emma. Get out of my sight, right now." "But my coat, my purse," Emma stammered, her teeth beginning to chatter. "Consider them confiscated to pay for the food you stole," Collins sneered. He turned around, grabbed the heavy metal door handle, and looked back one last time. "If you're not off this property in 2 minutes, I'm calling the cops on both of you for trespassing." Slam. The door shut. The lock clicked. The lights of the restaurant seemed to dim, leaving Emma and Margaret in the semi-darkness of the alley. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the whistling wind. Emma sat there for a moment, stunned. She had just lost everything: her job, her tips, her coat, her way home. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She wouldn't be able to pay the heating bill. Her brother would be cold this month. But then she heard a sound, a soft, weeping sound. She turned. Margaret was crying silently, staring at the ruined food in the snow. Her frail shoulders shook violently. Emma wiped her own tears away. She couldn't fall apart, not now. "Hey," Emma whispered, her voice trembling but gentle. She crawled over to Margaret. "Hey, it's okay. Don't cry, please." Margaret looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, filled with a profound shame. I caused this," she rasped, her voice sounding like dry leaves scraping together. "You lost your job because of an old hag like me." "No," Emma shook her head firmly. "I lost my job because my boss is a monster. You didn't do anything wrong." The wind picked up again, a brutal gust that made Margaret curl into a ball. She was freezing to death. Emma could see the blue tint in the woman's lips deepening. Emma didn't think. She just acted. She was wearing only her thin waitress uniform, a white button-down shirt and a black skirt. But she reached up and unbuttoned her cardigan, her only layer of warmth. "Here," Emma said, draping the cardigan over Margaret's shoulders and tucking it tight around her neck. She then took off her scarf, a cheap knitted red thing her brother had made her, and wrapped it around the old woman's head. "Child, no," Margaret protested weakly, trying to push it back. "You'll freeze." "I'm young," Emma said, forcing a brave smile through her chattering teeth. She rubbed Margaret's icy hands between her own to generate friction. "I can handle it. You need this more." They sat there for a moment, huddled together against the storm. The warmth from the cardigan and Emma's body heat slowly stopped Margaret's violent shivering. Slowly, with great effort, Margaret reached into the deep pocket of her tattered coat. Her hand came out shaking, holding something. It wasn't money. It was a small, tarnished silver locket. It looked old, dented, and worthless to the naked eye. "Take it," Margaret whispered, pressing it into Emma's frozen palm. Her eyes, suddenly sharp and intense, locked onto Emma's. It's all I have. Please, you saved me. Take it and sell it. It might get you a warm meal." Emma looked at the locket. She knew that for a woman living on the streets, an object like this wasn't just jewelry. It was a memory. It was probably the last thing she owned that connected her to who she used to be. Emma gently closed Margaret's fingers back over the locket. "No, ma'am," Emma said softly. Margaret looked shocked. "But you have nothing. You refused the manager's order and now you have nothing. Why?" Emma smiled, a genuine sad smile that lit up the dark alley. My mom used to tell me something before she passed, Emma said, her voice barely a whisper against the wind. Kindness isn't a transaction, ma'am. If I take your only treasure, then I didn't help you. I just traded with you. Keep it. Margaret froze. The old woman stared at Emma with an expression that was unreadable, a mix of shock, awe, and something else, something powerful. For a brief second, the homeless woman mask seemed to slip. Margaret's posture straightened just a fraction. The look in her eyes shifted from helpless to assessing. She wasn't looking at a waitress anymore. She was looking at a soul. You are a rare thing, child, Margaret whispered, her voice suddenly steady, lacking the rasp it had before. A very rare thing. Come on, Emma said, standing up on shaky legs and offering her hand. We can't stay here. There's a subway station 2 blocks down. It's warm there. I'll walk you. Emma helped the old woman up, but as they turned to leave the alley, neither of them noticed a black SUV rolling slowly to a stop just around the corner. The window rolled down, and a pair of eyes watched them from the shadows. Emma thought she had hit rock bottom. She thought the worst was over. She was wrong. The subway station was a grim sanctuary of flickering fluorescent lights and the smell of stale urine. But it was warm, or at least warmer than the frozen hell outside. Emma helped Margaret sit on a wooden bench near the turnstiles. The old woman looked better. Color was returning to her cheeks thanks to Emma's cardigan and the warmth of the station. You stay here, okay? Emma said, her voice shaking from the residual cold. She rubbed her arms, now covered only by her thin white waitress shirt. The night guard comes around at 6 a.m. He's nice. He won't kick you out. Margaret grabbed Emma's wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Go home, child, Margaret said, her eyes intense, almost commanding. Go to your family. Do not worry about me. The storm. It passes. It always passes. I hope so. Emma forced a weak smile. She didn't have the heart to tell the old woman that for her the storm was just beginning. Emma turned and walked away, passing through the turnstile. She didn't look back. If she had, she might have seen Margaret stand up, not like a frail old woman, but with a sudden sharp posture, and walk briskly toward a payphone in the corner, her demeanor completely changing. But Emma didn't see that. She only saw the long, cold walk home. It took Emma 40 minutes to walk the 6 blocks to her apartment complex. Without her coat, the wind bit through her shirt like shards of glass. By the time she reached the crumbling brick building in the poorest district of Chicago, her lips were blue, and she couldn't feel her toes. She climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, her legs feeling like lead. All she wanted was to hug her little brother Leo. He was 7 years old, sick with chronic asthma, and he was the only reason she was still fighting. She reached her door, number 4B. It was open. Emma's heart stopped. Panic, hotter than the cold, flooded her veins. Robbers? Leo, she screamed, rushing inside. The apartment was freezing. The small electric heater she had left running was unplugged. The lights were on, harsh and unforgiving. And there, standing in the middle of the tiny living room, was Mr. Russo, the landlord. He was a large, greasy man who smelled permanently of cheap cigars and sweat. He was tossing clothes, Leo's clothes, into a black trash bag. Leo was sitting on the ragged sofa, clutching his inhaler, his eyes wide with terror. He was wrapped in all the blankets they owned, trembling. Mr. Russo, Emma gasped, rushing to shield her brother. What are you doing? Put that down! Russo stopped and looked at her. He sneered, his eyes scanning her uniform. Well, look who finally decided to show up, and without a coat? You spend your rent money on booze, Emma. I was at work, Emma cried. Please stop. Why are you touching our things? You're 3 weeks late on rent, Russo barked, throwing a framed photo of Emma's parents into the bag. Glass shattered. I told you yesterday, pay up or get out. I have a new tenant willing to pay double starting January 1st. I want this place cleared. But it's Christmas Eve, Emma pleaded, tears streaming down her frozen face. Mr. Russo, please, I just lost my job tonight, but I'll find another one. I swear. Just give me a few days. You can't throw a child out in a blizzard. Russo laughed. It was a cruel, dry sound. Lost your job? He shook his head, feigning disappointment. So you have no money, no job, and you expect me to run a charity? This is a business, sweetheart, not a shelter. He walked over to the door and threw the trash bag into the hallway. Out, he commanded. pointing a thick finger at the hallway. Now, or I call the cops and tell them you're squatting. And you know what happens to the kid if the cops come, right? Social services will take him. Is that what you want? The threat hung in the air like a guillotine. Social services. They would separate them. Leo would go to a foster home. Emma would lose the last person she loved. Emma looked at Leo. The boy was crying silently, huge tears rolling down his pale cheeks. "Come on, Leo," Emma whispered, her voice breaking. She felt like she was dying inside. She grabbed the blankets from the sofa and wrapped them tighter around her brother. She picked up her purse, empty of tips, and took Leo's hand. They walked out of the apartment. Russo slammed the door behind them and locked it. The sound echoed like a gunshot. 10 minutes later, the street was empty. The snow was falling harder now, burying the world in white silence. Emma and Leo sat under the concrete awning of a bus stop. It offered shelter from the wind, but not the cold. They were huddled together on the metal bench, a small pile of human misery against the vast, indifferent city. Emma held Leo tight against her chest, trying to transfer whatever heat she had left to him. She had failed. She had tried to be good. She had tried to be kind. She had saved a stranger, and for what? "Em?" Leo's voice was small, muffled by the blanket. "Yeah, buddy?" Emma choked out, stroking his hair. Is Santa still coming?" The question broke her. It shattered the last piece of resolve she was holding on to. Emma looked up at the gray, swirling skies. She wanted to scream. She wanted to curse Collins, curse Russo, curse the old woman, curse God. "I don't know, Leo," she whispered, hot tears freezing on her cheeks. "I don't know." Leo coughed, a wet, rattling sound deep in his chest. He shivered violently. "I'm cold, Em," he whined. "I'm really cold." "I know," Emma sobbed, hugging him so tight it hurt. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She closed her eyes, waiting for the end. She had nothing left. No plan, no hope. Just the cold darkness. But she didn't hear the deep, guttural rumble of engines approaching. She didn't see the beams of light cutting through the snowstorm like searchlights. She didn't know that the old woman she had saved hadn't just gone to a payphone. She had made a call to the most powerful people in the city, and they were coming. The sound started as a low vibration in the concrete beneath their feet. At first, Emma thought it was a snowplow, a heavy, grinding mechanical noise, but it grew louder, deeper. It wasn't the clanking of a rusty municipal truck. It was the purr of precision engineering. It was the sound of raw power. Leo lifted his head from Emma's chest. "Em, what's that?" Before Emma could answer, the street was flooded with blinding white light. It wasn't just one pair of headlights. It was 6, 8, 12. A convoy of 5 blacked-out Cadillac Escalades and a silver Rolls-Royce Phantom turned the corner, moving in a V formation like a presidential motorcade. They cut through the unplowed snow as if it wasn't even there. Emma squeezed Leo's hand, terror gripping her throat. "Don't look, Leo. Just keep your head down." Her mind raced. Police? Immigration? Did Russo call the cops on us already? The convoy slowed down and surrounded the bus stop, blocking off the entire street. The engines idled, a low, menacing growl that vibrated in Emma's chest. The headlights were so bright she had to squint, shielding her eyes with a freezing hand. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Then, simultaneously, the doors of the SUVs flew open. Men poured out, at least 10 of them. They were huge, dressed in identical, thick black trench coats, earpieces, and leather gloves. They moved with military precision, ignoring the blizzard, forming a perimeter around the bus stop. Emma pulled Leo behind her, backing up against the dirty plastic wall of the shelter. "We didn't do anything," Emma screamed, her voice cracking with fear. "We're just waiting for a bus. Please leave us alone." The men didn't answer. They didn't even look at her. They stood like statues, facing outward, securing the area. Then the rear door of the silver Rolls-Royce opened. A driver in a uniform stepped out, opened a large black umbrella, and held it over the passenger door. A man stepped out. He was tall, imposing, with sharp jawlines that looked cut from granite. He wore a long charcoal wool coat that probably cost more than the entire apartment building Emma had just been kicked out of. He didn't wear a hat. Snowflakes landed on his dark hair and seemed to melt instantly from the heat of his intensity. This was Ethan Sterling. the restaurant king of Chicago, the man whose face was on the cover of Forbes last month. He walked straight toward the bus stop, his leather shoes making no sound on the snow. Emma trembled. She recognized him. Everyone in the service industry knew who Ethan Sterling was. He was the owner of the Gilded Spoon, the very restaurant she had just been fired from. Oh God, she thought. Collins called him. He's here to press charges for the stolen chicken. I'm going to jail. Stay back, Emma warned, holding up a shaking hand. My brother is sick. Don't touch him. Ethan stopped 3 feet away. He didn't look angry. He looked devastated. He looked at Emma, shivering in her thin shirt. He looked at little Leo, wrapped in blankets, wheezing. Then, the billionaire did something that made the bodyguards flinch. He dropped to one knee in the dirty snow. He looked directly into Emma's terrified eyes. You gave her your coat, Ethan said. His voice wasn't a bark. It was a deep, resonant baritone filled with an emotion Emma couldn't place. What? Emma stammered. You gave her your scarf, Ethan continued, his eyes scanning the red knit scarf still wrapped around. Emma looked past Ethan. From the back of the Rolls-Royce, another figure emerged. It was Margaret, but she wasn't the shivering pile of rags anymore. She was wrapped in a thick, luxurious fur blanket. A medic was standing next to her, checking her vitals. She looked frail, yes, but she stood tall. She walked past the bodyguards, past her son, and stopped right in front of Emma. Margaret reached out a warm, gloved hand and touched Emma's frozen cheek. I told you, child, Margaret said, her voice soft but commanding. Kindness isn't a transaction, but it is an investment, and yours just paid off. Emma looked from Margaret to Ethan, her brain struggling to process the reality. She's your mother? Emma whispered. Ethan stood up, his face hardening as he looked at the pathetic state of the bus stop, then softening as he looked back at Emma. My mother has dementia, Ethan said, his voice thick with repressed emotion. She wandered off from her penthouse this afternoon. We've been looking for her for 6 hours. The police, private security, no one could find her in the storm. He took a step closer. My security team pulled the footage from the restaurant cameras, Ethan said. We saw everything. We saw you feed her. We saw you clothe her. And we saw that bastard kick you out into the cold because of it. Ethan took off his own charcoal wool coat. He wrapped it around Emma's shoulders. The warmth was instant, smelling of expensive cologne and safety. Where do you live, Emma? Ethan asked gently. We will take you home. Emma looked down, tears freezing on her lashes. She couldn't breathe. We don't have a home, she choked out, a sob escaping her throat. My landlord, he threw us out right after I got fired. We have nowhere to go. The air around Ethan seemed to drop another 10 degrees. His jaw tightened so hard a muscle twitched in his cheek. He looked at his mother. Margaret nodded, a silent, grim understanding passing between them. Ethan turned to his head of security. Get the boy in the car with the medic, now. Turn up the heat. Then he turned back to Emma. You're wrong, Emma, Ethan said, extending his hand to her. You do have somewhere to go. Tonight, you are guests of the Sterling family. He paused, looking toward the direction of the Gilded Spoon and then toward the direction of the apartment complex. His eyes turned into cold, hard steel. And tomorrow, Ethan's voice was a low growl that promised violence. Tomorrow, we are going to pay some people a visit, and God help them when we arrive. Christmas morning at the Gilded Spoon was the most important service of the year. The restaurant was packed with the city's elite, senators, celebrities, and socialites, all enjoying their $200 brunches under the warm glow of the chandeliers. Mr. Collins was in his element. He moved through the dining room like a peacock, bowing to guests, pouring champagne, and snapping his fingers at the terrified staff. He felt invincible. He had cleaned house last night, getting rid of that soft-hearted Emma and the beggar. Today, the restaurant was perfect. Mr. Collins, the hostess whispered urgently, her eyes wide. The owner is here. Collins froze. His heart skipped a beat. Ethan Sterling never visited on Christmas. He was a ghost, a legend, who signed the checks but rarely showed his face. Mr. Sterling? Collins straightened his tie, checking his reflection in a spoon. Excellent. Is he alone? No, sir. He has an entourage. Collins rushed to the front entrance, a plastic smile plastered on his face. The heavy oak doors swung open. The entire restaurant seemed to hush as Ethan Sterling walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing a casual but intimidatingly expensive cashmere sweater and dark jeans. His presence sucked the air out of the room. Behind him stood 4 of his massive security guards. Collins practically ran over, bowing low. "Mr. Sterling, what an unexpected honor," Collins oozed, extending a sweaty hand. "To what do we owe this pleasure on Christmas Day? Everything is running perfectly, as you can see." Ethan didn't shake the hand. He didn't even look at it. He stared straight at Collins with eyes cold enough to freeze hell. "Is it?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but carrying to the back of the room. "I'm looking for a waitress. Blonde. Worked Station 4 last night. Where is she?" Collins blinked. He laughed nervously. "Oh, you mean Emma? Sir, I'm afraid I had to terminate her employment last night. Caught her stealing food. Can you believe it? Stealing from you, sir. I threw her out immediately to protect the brand." "You threw her out," Ethan repeated slowly. "Yes, into the snow," Collins boasted, trying to sound like a tough manager. "We have zero tolerance for thieves and vagrants here." Ethan stepped to the side. "Come in." The security guards parted. Emma walked in. She wasn't wearing her uniform. She was wearing a stunning, tailored white winter coat, one that looked remarkably like the one in the store window next door. Her hair was down, washed and brushed. She looked beautiful, but her hands were trembling by her sides. Collins's jaw dropped. His face turned a mottled shade of red. "You!" Collins hissed, forgetting himself for a second. He stepped toward Emma aggressively. "I told you never to set foot in here again. Security, get this trash out of—" "Do not speak to her!" Ethan's roar shook the crystal glasses on the tables. The entire restaurant went deathly silent. Every fork stopped. Every conversation died. Collins shrank back, terrified. "Mr. Sterling, I don't understand. She's a thief. She was feeding a homeless junkie outside." "That junkie," Ethan interrupted, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "is my mother." The color drained from Collins's face so fast he looked like a corpse. "What?" "Bring her in," Ethan commanded. 2 more guards entered, escorting Margaret. She was dressed in an elegant silk dress, looking every bit the matriarch of the Sterling Empire. She walked slowly, but her gaze was sharp. She stopped right in front of Collins. "You," Collins whispered, his knees buckling. "But you were in rags." "I have dementia," Margaret said clearly, her voice echoing in the silent room. "I was lost. I was confused, and I was freezing to death." She pointed a finger at Collins. "You kicked a bowl of food out of my hands. You called me a parasite." She then pointed to Emma. "And this girl gave me the coat off her back. She lost her job to save my life, and you laughed while she cried." A collective gasp swept through the dining room. The wealthy patrons looked at Collins with absolute disgust. Whispers erupted. Phones were raised, recording the scene. "Mr. Sterling, please," Collins stammered, sweat pouring down his face. "I didn't know. If I had known it was your mother, I would have—" "You would have what?" Ethan stepped forward, towering over the manager. "You would have been kind. You would have been decent. Character isn't about how you treat the powerful, Collins. It's about how you treat the powerless." Ethan pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I reviewed the security tapes," Ethan said, holding the paper up. "You didn't just fire her, you stole her coat, you stole her tips, you sent a young woman into a blizzard with nothing." Ethan tore the paper in half and let the pieces flutter to the floor. "You are fired, Collins, effective immediately." "But my pension, my severance," Collins pleaded, grabbing Ethan's arm. One of the security guards stepped in and grabbed Collins by the collar, lifting him almost off the floor. "And one more thing," Ethan said, turning to face the dining room, addressing the crowd. "I'm banning you from all Sterling properties. If you step foot in any of my hotels, restaurants, or buildings, you will be arrested for trespassing. Get him out of my sight!" The guards dragged Collins toward the door. He was kicking and screaming. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. Emma, please." But Emma didn't look at him. She looked at Margaret, who gave her a proud, grandmotherly nod. The doors slammed shut behind Collins, throwing him out into the exact same cold he had sentenced Emma to the night before. The restaurant was dead silent. Ethan turned to Emma. His expression softened completely. "I apologize for the scene," he said gently, "but justice had to be public." He turned to the staff, who were huddled in the corner, terrified they were next. "Everyone listen up," Ethan announced. "I need a new manager. Someone who understands that this company is built on service and humanity." He looked at Emma. "Emma, I know this is sudden, and I know you just got your job back, but I don't want you to be a waitress." Ethan smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "How would you like to run this place?" The silence in the restaurant was broken by the sound of weeping, but this time it wasn't from despair. Emma covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. "Manager? Me? Mr. Sterling, I dropped out of college to take care of my brother. I don't have a degree. I don't have experience running a business." Ethan shook his head, a small, genuine smile playing on his lips. "You managed to keep your dignity while being humiliated," Ethan said softly. "You managed to find compassion when you had nothing. You managed to save my mother when the rest of the world ignored her. I can teach you how to read a spreadsheet, Emma. I cannot teach someone how to have a heart. The job is yours, if you want it." I do," Emma whispered. "Thank you." "Good," Ethan nodded. He checked his watch. "But first, we have unfinished business. You mentioned a landlord?" 30 minutes later, the convoy of black Escalades and the silver Rolls-Royce pulled up to the crumbling brick apartment building in the slums. The contrast was jarring. Millions of dollars of machinery parked in front of a building with peeling paint and broken windows. "Mr." Russo was standing on the stoop, smoking a cigar, kicking at the black trash bags containing Emma and Leo's life possessions. "About time you came back for your junk," Russo shouted as he saw a car pull up, squinting through the snow. "I was about to call the dump truck to—" The words died in his throat as he saw the Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament on the Rolls-Royce. The driver opened the door. Ethan stepped out, then Emma. Russo's cigar fell out of his mouth. "Emma?" Russo stammered, looking at her expensive white coat. "What? Whose car is this?" Ethan walked up to Russo. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He held up a smartphone. "Mr. Russo," Ethan said calmly, "I just got off the phone with the bank that holds the mortgage on this building. It turns out you've been missing payments for 6 months while pocketing the tenant's cash." Russo turned pale. "Now wait a minute, sir. I can explain." "Don't bother," Ethan interrupted. "I just bought the debt. Effective 5 minutes ago, I am the owner of this building." Russo's knees buckled. You bought the building?" "I did," Ethan said, looking up at the rotting facade. "I'm going to renovate it. It's going to be a model for safe, affordable housing for single mothers and struggling families." Ethan looked back down at Russo, his eyes hard as flint. "But I have a strict policy for my employees. I don't hire bullies. You're evicted, Mr. Russo. You have 1 hour to vacate the premises. Whatever you leave behind goes to the dump." Russo stood there, mouth open, paralyzed by the instant karma. "Come on," Ethan said to Emma, guiding her away from the stunned landlord. "Let's get your things. You won't be staying here tonight." The drive to the Sterling estate was like a dream. They drove through iron gates, up a winding driveway lined with ancient oak trees covered in snow. The mansion looked like a castle, glowing with warm lights. Inside, it was a paradise. A 20-foot Christmas tree stood in the grand foyer. A fireplace crackled with logs the size of tree trunks. Leo, who had been treated by the private medic in the car, was already looking better. His wheezing had stopped. He ran into the foyer, his eyes wide with wonder. "Em, look!" Leo pointed at the tree. "Is this Santa's house?" Margaret was sitting by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea. When she saw them, her face lit up. "Welcome home," she said. That evening they didn't eat in the formal dining room. They sat on the rug by the fire, the billionaire, the matriarch, the waitress, and the sick boy. They ate the finest Christmas dinner prepared by a private chef, but they ate it with their hands, laughing, sharing stories. Ethan watched Emma help Leo open presents that Ethan had sent his assistant to buy an hour ago. He saw the way the firelight danced in her hair. He saw the way she looked at his mother with genuine love, not the sycophancy he was used to from social climbers. He realized something. He had spent his life building an empire, but this big house had always been empty, cold. Tonight, it was warm. After dinner, Emma tucked Leo into a guest bed that was bigger than their entire old apartment. She walked out onto the balcony, looking over the snowy grounds. Ethan joined her. He handed her a cup of hot cocoa. "He's going to be okay," Ethan said, standing beside her. "I've already arranged for the best specialists in the city to see him tomorrow. His asthma will be managed. He'll have a normal life." Emma turned to him, her eyes welling up again. "Why? Why are you doing all this? You gave me a job. You saved our home. You saved my brother. It's too much." Ethan turned to face her. He reached out and brushed a snowflake from her hair. "You saved my world, Emma," he said, looking toward the room where his mother was sleeping. "My mother, she's all I have. You didn't know who she was. You didn't know who I was. You just saw a person in need. In a world full of people who only want to take, you were the only one who gave." He took a deep breath. "I don't just want you to manage the restaurant, Emma. I want you to help me run the foundation. I want you by my side. We can change a lot of lives." Emma looked into his eyes. She saw the loneliness behind the power and the hope behind the offer. She smiled, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel the cold. "I'd like that," she whispered. They stood there, watching the snow fall, two people from different worlds who had found a bridge in the middle of a storm. But the story doesn't end with a job or a house. True impact isn't measured in days, it's measured in decades. The snow melted, the gray slush of Chicago turned into the vibrant green of spring. And with the changing seasons, everything in Emma's world began to bloom. The transformation started at the Gilded Spoon. On her first day as general manager, Emma didn't fire the staff. She gathered them. The chefs, the busboys, the hostesses, everyone who had lived in terror under Mr. Collins. "We serve the best food in the city," Emma told them, standing tall in a suit that actually fit her. "But from now on, we serve it with respect, to the customers and to each other." She changed the rules. No more throwing leftovers into the trash. Every night, unserved food was packaged neatly. At 11 p.m., a local shelter van would pull up to the back door, not to beg, but to pick up the donations Emma had arranged. The restaurant flourished. Profits didn't drop. They soared. People came for the food, but they stayed for the warmth. The Ice Palace reputation of the Gilded Spoon melted away, replaced by a spirit of genuine hospitality. But the biggest change wasn't in the restaurant. It was in the slums. The crumbling brick building where Emma and Leo used to freeze was wrapped in scaffolding. Ethan kept his word. He didn't just patch the roof, he gutted the place. He and Emma spent weekends there, wearing hard hats, looking over blueprints. One afternoon, amidst the smell of sawdust and fresh paint, Emma found Ethan sanding a banister himself. His expensive shirt was covered in dust. "You have a crew for this," Emma laughed, handing him a bottle of water. "I know." Ethan wiped his brow, leaving a streak of dirt. He looked at the building with pride. "But I wanted to build this with you, not just pay for it." They renamed the building the Margaret House. When it opened 6 months later, it wasn't a slum. It was a sanctuary. Low-income families moved into clean, warm apartments with working heat and new appliances. There was a playground in the courtyard where drug deals used to happen. And Leo? Leo was the heartbeat of their new life. With proper medication and a warm home at the Sterling estate, the asthma that had plagued him vanished into the background. There was a Saturday in July that Emma would never forget. She was sitting on the porch of the estate, watching Leo run across the vast green lawn, chasing a golden retriever puppy Ethan had surprised him with. Leo was laughing. It was a full, deep belly laugh, a sound Emma hadn't heard in years because he had always been too breathless to make it. Margaret sat beside Emma in a rocking chair. The dementia had its good days and bad days, but today was a good day. She reached out and held Emma's hand. "Look at them," Margaret whispered, watching Ethan running after Leo, tackling the boy onto the grass in a playful wrestle. "He never laughed much before," Margaret said, referring to her own son, the billionaire. "He was always so serious, so cold. You brought the sun out, Emma." Emma squeezed Margaret's hand, tears of gratitude pricking her eyes. She looked at the man she was falling in love with and the brother she had saved. The bond between Emma and Ethan grew not with grand gestures, but in the quiet moments, late nights reviewing budgets for the foundation, shared coffees in the kitchen at 6 a.m. before the house woke up, the way his hand would linger on the small of her back when they attended charity galas. They were a team, a force of nature. One evening, a year after that fateful Christmas Eve, they returned to the alley behind the Gilded Spoon. It was snowing again. Ethan stopped the car. He turned to Emma. "This is where I almost lost you," he said quietly. "And this is where you found us." He didn't propose with a ring that night. That would come later. Instead, he handed her a set of keys. "To the foundation," Ethan said. "I'm stepping down as president. I want you to lead it. I trust your heart more than I trust my own head." Emma took the keys. She wasn't the scared waitress anymore. She was a leader. She was a mother figure. She was a partner. She looked at the spot where she had fed Margaret the soup. The snow was covering the pavement, but the memory burned bright. "We have work to do," Emma smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "Yes," Ethan agreed, starting the engine. "We're just getting started." But neither of them knew just how far their legacy would reach. They didn't know that the seeds they planted in these first few years would grow into a forest that would shelter thousands. 20 years later. The wind in Chicago was just as cold as it had been 2 decades ago, but inside the grand hall of the Margaret Sterling Foundation, the air was warm and filled with the thunderous applause of 2,000 people. The camera pans over the crowd. We see faces of all colors, all ages. We see families who were once homeless now sitting in suits. We see children who were given scholarships now graduating as doctors and engineers. In the front row, 2 figures sit holding hands. Ethan is older now. His hair is silver, lending him an air of distinguished wisdom. He leans on a cane, but his grip on his wife's hand is as strong as ever. Beside him is Emma. At 44, she radiates an elegance that money can't buy. There are laugh lines around her eyes, evidence of a life filled with more joy than sorrow. She is wearing a simple silver locket around her neck. The locket. They are looking up at the stage. Standing at the podium is a man in his late 20s. He is tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a doctor's coat over his suit. He adjusts the microphone, his blue eyes scanning the crowd with confidence. It is Leo. The wheezing, terrified boy who once huddled under a bus stop is now the director of pediatric medicine for the city's largest charity hospital. "Thank you," Leo says, his voice deep and steady. "When people ask me how I became a doctor, they expect me to talk about medical school or grades." He pauses, looking down at his sister in the front row. "But the truth is, my education didn't start in a classroom. It started in an alleyway on Christmas Eve 20 years ago." The room goes silent. "That night," Leo continues, "my sister Emma didn't have $1 to her name. She didn't have a coat. She didn't have a future. But when she saw a stranger freezing in the snow, she didn't calculate the cost. She didn't ask, 'What's in it for me?'" Leo smiles, tears glistening in his eyes. "She gave away the only warmth she had, and in return, the universe gave us a life." Leo gestures to the massive screen behind him. A photo appears. It's a black and white picture of Margaret Sterling, smiling, holding a much younger Leo on her lap. Margaret had passed away 5 years ago, peacefully in her sleep, but her name was now on hospitals, shelters, and schools across the country. "My grandmother, Margaret, used to say something that is etched above the doors of this building," Leo says. He points to the back of the hall. Carved into the marble archway above the exit in gold letters is the phrase, "We live in a world that tells us to hoard." Leo's voice rises, passionate and commanding, "to protect what is ours, to ignore the beggar because it's uncomfortable. But look around you." He spreads his arms, encompassing the thousands of lives changed by the foundation. None of this exists because a billionaire wrote a check. Checks run out. Money is spent. This, he taps his heart, this exists because a waitress gave a bowl of soup to a woman she thought could never pay her back. Leo looks directly at Emma. "I love you, Em. You didn't just save my life, you taught me how to live it." The crowd erupts. It's a standing ovation that shakes the floorboards. Emma buries her face in Ethan's shoulder, weeping happy tears. Ethan kisses her forehead, whispering, "You did good, Emma. You did good." Later that night, the lights of the hall are dimmed. The guests have gone. Emma and Ethan walk out into the snowy Chicago night. The snow falls softly, covering the city in a blanket of white. They walk past the spot where the old Gilded Spoon used to be. It's now a community kitchen that feeds anyone who is hungry 24/7. No questions asked, no money needed. Through the window, they see a young waitress, maybe 20 years old, handing a hot cup of coffee to a shivering man who just walked in from the cold. The man tries to offer her some coins. The waitress shakes her head, smiles, and pushes the coins back to him. Emma stops. She watches the scene unfold. It's a perfect mirror of the past. Ethan wraps his arm around her. Ready to go home? Emma touches the locket at her throat. She smiles, watching the young waitress work. "I am home, Ethan," she says softly. "We all are." The camera pulls back, rising higher and higher into the snowy sky, showing the lights of the city. But the brightest light isn't from the skyscrapers. It's from the warmth radiating from the kitchen below.